Este podcast está patrocinado por Gong. Gong es una plataforma de inteligencia artificial optimizada para hispanohablantes y elegida por muchas compañías líderes. Si quieres aprender cómo cerrar más oportunidades, hacer proyecciones de ventas mucho más precisas y conseguir insights en tiempo real sobre tu mercado y tus competidores, vete a gong.io/demo para verlo en vivo.
How's it going? Hello. Sorry, we'll continue with the beers afterwards. So, just put it in pause for a second. Thank you so much for coming. I think we had around 100 people confirmed, which is great because there were 100 spots. So it's a pleasure to have you guys here and to introduce you to Luis, and you already know, familiar face from Revenue Square, and my friend Sunny from Gong, who is the director of strategy there. Before we actually go into this a little bit, I think the idea today is to cover what's the future of sales, some actionable things that you can take home in terms of the role that AI and data specifically is having on the field. But before we get there, a quick word on Sunny to introduce him. I'll be brief. I know him from over 10 years ago. He was coming fresh from Deloitte, a nice consulting boy, and we met in Silicon Valley at Bloomreach, which was a company that became a success story. We were both account managers. He was a much better account manager than me, and he went on to join Gong as an early employee. I think the story of Gong, I'll let him talk about it more. But I think it's one of the most relevant companies in the tech space when it comes to sales. They've been doing this for a while. And today we're just going to show you some stuff that is applicable to Gong, but also things that you should be doing or thinking forward in terms of data, AI when it comes to sales. So yeah, I think that's it for an intro. Before we get into this, I'd like to do one quick thing because I'll give you the details, okay? The breakdown. The mission of Revenue Square basically is to elevate the sales profession in the Spanish-speaking world, which I think all of you know. But I'd like to take 1 minute, okay? So that all of you guys know each other, because then it's going to be chaos and mayhem and you might not get the chance. So 1 minute. Say hello to the person to the left, to the right, and behind you. And if you see someone around, say hello, say your name, where you work, and something you like to do, okay? So take a minute and do it. Perfect. Great job. So what's going to happen here before we release you to more beers? We're going to talk about, set the background, right? Set the stage with Sunny, Sales AI. And then we're going to let him give us 4 actionable insights based on 5 actionable insights based on data, 1 for free. Okay, so let's get into it. So Spain and generally the Spanish-speaking world sees sales as pretty lame, or they don't understand what sales is. We always talk about when you go to your Christmas party or Christmas Eve dinner, and everybody around the table doesn't really understand what sales is. Why do you think sales is cool, and how did you fall into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, really happy to be here. It's funny, if I've seen this exercise done in the US where you greet your neighbor. In the US, it takes 30 seconds. Everybody's looking right forward again. I love how formal you guys are. Just like, he's like, watch, it's going to be 3 minutes before we bring it back. And indeed, it was true. It took Lucian to stand up. But anyways, yeah. So this question, sales, I actually agree with Iban. When I first encountered sales, it was at Bloomreach. And I didn't think it was very cool. I actually agree with him. Because the people I saw doing it were usually like 50-year-old men and like vests and nice button-up shirts and poor-fitting jeans and tennis shoes. And they're selling because they know the people. It's all very relationship-driven. And I was looking at these guys and I was like, this is like a boys' club. I don't want to be a part of this. And then when I got to Gong, it became demystified for me. I saw a lot of people that look like us, young people, closing like $50K, $60K, $70K, $1,000 deals. And I was like, this might be pretty interesting. And this is a core part of the call to talk today, which is if you go kind of deconstruct sales, it becomes really fun and actually really doable. So, I mean, my opinion has completely shifted. I used to think sales was for these stuffy old guys. And now I'm seeing really young people making really a lot of money doing sales, and it looks really fun. So it's changed a ton. And I think you guys all being here, you're hungry for that. You want to deconstruct sales as well. And that's how my mind is kind of flipped on sales.
And what has changed? What are the assumptions that changed? Like, I always talk about sales in Spain, and I tell them, like in the US today, if you say you work in software sales, it is pretty widely understood that you're not selling second-hand cars, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is a skill and value. There's lots of value in that, but it is a strategic role that has a lot of process around it, that has predictability, that is a pretty strategic role, and most importantly, and most overlooked, at least in our market, typically, or a less mature market, is their reliance on data, because data is basically what is the foundation of being able to build processes and predictability and a sales engine, basically. So why is data important in sales?
Yeah, for the reason I talked about before, right? If you want to demystify it, you kind of break it down to component parts. One of the big things I noticed is there is more of an emphasis on techniques now, which in the past, I think we all probably didn't like it that much because it's very relationship driven. But with more of sales being able to be quantified, you can start understanding what makes somebody great, what makes somebody else not great. And it's interesting you mentioned the process part because, wait, how many people in here are ex-athletes, like used to play sports? A couple?
Or play a lot of sports.
Okay. How many of you are like I was like liberal arts, did music, did like literature, things like that? A couple of you guys. Okay, the fascinating thing when I went around the US was that a lot of sales leaders actually look for ex-athletes and ex-liberal arts majors. Because like you mentioned, there's like a process to it, but there's also like an art to it. And these personas do really well in sales because one, you have like the grit, you have the hustle to get things done, but then you also have the creativity to actually bring a lot of your own things to it. And it starts a process. It starts with actually understanding like the component parts of sales. So once you understand that, you can start bringing a lot of yourself to the profession, which I found really interesting. But it was really interesting. Just like when we talk to salespeople, especially sales leaders, they're looking for like, you don't have to come from a sales background. They're looking for people with process, with hustle, and then kind of bring yourself into the profession.
Yeah, and so in this new era, right, where data plays an increasingly important role, how should people think about using AI to get ahead? Very pragmatically, right? Because we've gone through different eras in terms of a sales tech stack, right? In the beginning of times, there was no tech stack. Then came Salesforce and company. Then came sales intelligence tools. Because not that Salesforce is not intelligent, but I'm just saying their sales
or their AEs.
Yes, exactly. Sales intelligence, sales optimization, sales productivity. There's a whole stack in the 2010s that came up, with a bunch of success stories in which I would categorize Gong, but just the funnel, the sheer size of the tech stack for a bunch of, some of you are here working tech, some don't, but the tech stack should apply to both, let's call it industries, or all industries.
Sure, yeah.
So what's going on now? When you can get lost in this sea of tech tools, and how can you use data to get ahead?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get asked this a lot. Let's see. Wait, how many of you have your kind of conversations recorded? Just show of hands. A couple. Oh, okay. The front row is heavy on calls recorded. Okay, so there are two. I think there are two parts to it, right? So the first thing, what AI has been really good for is taking structured data. So basically, now your calls record. That's data that's now been captured. You can apply AI on top of it to actually do a lot of things. For a lot of companies that we see, if you're spending any time discussing what happened, you're going to be behind, because what these AI tools are really good for is summarizing and synthesizing what's already happened. So any conversation you have with, let's say, another coworker, your manager, your leader, it's about what to do next. So there's a lot of time savings there, right? Just on the recorded call side. On the other side, I think a good framework is basically, if you think about your day-to-day, if there are a set of things that you do that are, first of all, boring, repetitive, manual, there are probably tools out there that can actually take all that away so you could spend time selling. And selling to me means spending time with the customer. I think that's the most important thing that you should be doing, like kind of really getting to know the customer, understanding their pains, building that relationship. And to me, AI if we take all the chaos out around it, it's about making you do what you as a human is good at, which is not filling out Salesforce fields. It's not doing research. All these AI tools can do it for you. And I think the really important thing right now is that we're still really early in AI. There's all these tools being spun up that are free because everybody wants to get traction. They're purpose built, like they're trying to identify like a pain point or persona to work on. So find a way to use these tools, because at some point, some big companies can actually buy up all these tools and it won't be free anymore. So I think it's good to get that advantage now, get really familiar with these tools so that when it does come, you're already way ahead of the game. You already know how to use it in your day-to-day. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, something, I'm not to plug Gong, but I'm saying, but you know, it's something that we really are passionate about. Like, how do we actually separate what can done by AI versus what humans are uniquely good at, which is connecting with people and actually solving problems for people.
I'm also curious what Luisen just came back from a Salesforce Agent Force, okay, which is like Salesforce initiative of trying to get on top of the AI agent game, no? Which is
yeah, Sunny and I were actually talking about it right outside before you guys came in, and I mean it's. For Salesforce is probably the biggest thing has happened. You were talking about it the other day on your newsletter. Ivan writes a newsletter, and it was the agentic revolution thing. And Mark Benioff, the Salesforce founder, just straight up came out and said, we just don't sell CRM anymore. I mean, of course we do, but we just sell Agentforce. And Agentforce is our thing. And there's no Copilot. There's no AI here, AI there. It's just Agentforce. And the event was pretty good. Most of the clients were actually very surprised. There's a big wow effect. And I think in a lot of senses, it's because most industries away from tech or people that are not tech savvy, maybe like many of the Revenue Squared people, they're not aware of the impact that it can have. I've been using ChatGPT for years, right? We use it in Revenue Squared for a lot of things. And I have a lot of clients who have never seen AI put into context. And when you suddenly give them an actual autonomous agent that are able to do things. I have insurance as my industry. And they were talking basically to a contact center, but it was an AI. And it did 60 or 70% of the tasks that a human could do. So you think about it and you're like, okay, how much money may I save if all my contact center people are just dedicated to high priority tasks? And let's take that to sales, right? And okay, maybe my AE, all that 80% of admin work is suddenly poof, gone in a second. And I have an agent that is able to, hey, I need to quote this and include this, and then we're doing a ramp and a staggered activation and this and that. And suddenly it transforms from having to do 2 hours of adding things into Salesforce, which I sell Salesforce, but I hate adding things into Salesforce. Yeah, no, it works like that, right? No one likes adding things to their CRM. But suddenly, if that 3 hours are gone away, you have 3 hours of client meetings or 3 hours of following up on stuff that's actually high priority and important. And Salesforce has gone to that part, right? As Sunny was saying, just, okay, AI has a use. It's time saving, it's efficiency, is focus on high priority. And yeah, I'm pretty wowed by the fact that we were able to bring something to the market that fast.
That's cool. That's cool.
I didn't think I was actually going to be able to sell this in Q4, but here I am.
Nice. I have a harder question for both of you. So like, because I think it's one that's in a lot of our minds, at least it's definitely on mine. And it's, Jason Lemkin was framed it as the return of the full cycle AE, you know, like what's happening with SDRs, what's happening to prospecting for account executives as well in this agentic world where you have a lot of the conversational interfaces that are happening. A lot of the sales can be done conversationally in written form, right? Call it what you will. Also now with other types of models going into voice that almost indistinguishable from human, like what's happening with the opening of opportunities, right? So in my mind, the question then becomes, what's the scarce resource in this new era? So if you're a salesperson with agentic workflows or agentic systems that can do some of the opening of opportunities, what becomes scarce? Because presumably that's where you should put your focus in to become a better salesperson, right? So what becomes more scarce?
That's that. you're the one who's been invited.
That's true.
There's
buy some time with you. I have a general question, and I have a general answer, and then have like more specific sales questions. So, I think, let me just ask you guys: how many of you guys have gotten like an email that is very obviously from AI? Did you respond to that? No, you didn't.
The first one, maybe.
Yeah, it's just so rare. I think like we overcorrected on this like AI outbound.
We have a channel that's called Copywriting Lab, and we post all the great AI responses.
So bad, yeah. So I think taste and curation is a scarce resource. If you develop that for yourself, which is like just lean on being human, I think ultimately at the end of the day, we all buy from each other. We buy from people we like. It's never going to be AI. And I think the wave that I see now more and more is AI assisted selling. And you could change that assisted word to anything. I think it might increasingly more than just assisted. But I've talked to a bunch of companies where, I think when there's a wave of AI trying to replace SDRs, this company was like, no, we're going to make SDRs better. So we're going to actually have a solution that makes it really easy to actually research somebody on a very personal basis. So when you do reach out, it feels very genuine and warm, even though you only spent like 5 minutes on it, right? So I think it's those two things. The short answer is there's a really critical period right now of just becoming really sharp with AI. I honestly believe if you want it bad enough, if you're entrepreneur enough, there's so many tools out there that you can actually make and have yourself, without maybe like the one tool that will eventually win, you can create for yourself like the ultimate AI powered seller today. There's so many tools out there, and it's on you to kind of experiment and figure out what works for you. But I think the sooner you can understand what AI is strong at for you and what AI is poor at, so you don't do those things, the better you're going to be as a seller.
I'm going to have to completely agree with Sunny here. I did not. It's not that I was buying time, but I was thinking we were discussing the other day some other things, and I agree with you because you can apply it to almost anything, right? If you want to listen to a podcast, you don't want to listen to an AI generated podcast. Maybe the podcast was aided. It was kind of the structure may have been created with AI. Maybe you have some ideas, but at the end of the day, you wouldn't want to listen to it. It's the same way with a phone call. We had a conversation, we had a debate with this inside the community. I remember someone saying, "Hey, who has received a complete AI call?" And they were like, "Oh, I have like 5 or 10 people." And the question was, did you go through with it? Did you actually get the call with AI? And it's like, oh, the first time was cool. It was kind of interesting. It was new. It was, I don't know. Second time was like, Third time is like, okay, I'm going to stop blocking numbers. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing with emails, Ivan was saying, right? I think for me, an AI-powered seller, or assisted or whatever word you want to use, is going to be the way of the future. So I think to a certain extent, you may have that return of the full cycle if the AI, because here's the thing. Let me try to rephrase it, right? If you have the power of 3 people to liberate you of admin tasks, to generate more emails that then you curate, right? You have maybe your AI agent or your AI helper or whatever creates the list of people for you to call and maybe a summary of what you mentioned, and the research is here. So suddenly you open up whatever platform you're using, and the only thing that you see is name, number, position, why they might buy, research. So your job is just click and call. And suddenly you have that list that's horrible to do, because I remember when I was an SDR, I had 2 hours planned every single afternoon after calling to just plan the calls for the next day and do the research for the next day. And then try to find the number of that person. If I can't find the number, then next person, and do the research on that contact, etc. So suddenly you maybe have smaller territory, bigger territories for less AEs, because they can cover so much more. And I think that might be the move, because you're going to have people that are way more productive. And suddenly that usual distribution, right, and we've talked about this before, having 20% super performers, 20% low performers, and the 60% in the middle, suddenly you just look for the top 50%, and they do double the job, because they don't have to do double the hours. They just have to get an AI agent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I keep going back to what you said of like leaning to your human side. which is interesting because you have to tie that back to the data, which we circle back to art plus process or based on data, right? So everything is downstream from that. So if I'm an AE today, where should my take is, I think this is going to follow a power law, like usual, like a Pareto, right? Like 20% of people that are using the data and are paying attention to what tools to get ahead, to start becoming the job of the future ahead of the curve are going to be there, and they're going to deliver 10x the value. Has happened many times before throughout history. You can look at different industrial revolution. You can take history and you'll dissect it and everything. It follows a pattern, right? If you take this down to sales specifically, when it comes to AI, is okay. Look forward with what you have, which is data, and what else do you do? Like, what do you study? Like, where do you pay attention to?
Yeah, I love the idea of. Data being a superpower for salespeople. Wait, a quick question: how many people wear like a Aura ring or like a Whoop? Okay, a couple of you guys. Let me ask you: has your sleep gotten any better? Do you sleep better now you look at it? No, not at all.
Yeah, mine hasn't either.
No, okay. Well, some people just tell them how bad you are at sleeping.
Jorge, for example, has like 100%. It's pretty annoying. Yeah.
So I think the general idea is like what can get measured gets improved, right? And with so many more analytics out there now, you can I'll back up for a second. Sales was very boring for me when I thought it was relationship and experience. And it's not that. It's really, if you can break down how you sell into component parts, develop a process around it, find out the parts that you should improve and improve on those, it becomes extremely fun. And I'll give you one quick example. When I first joined Gong, actually before I joined Gong, he said I was a good account manager. I thought I was pretty good, to be honest. And then I went to Gong, and then I did my calls the exact same way as I did at Bloomreach. And the analytics are screaming at me. You talk way too long. You interrupt. You don't ask enough questions. And I was like, whoa, like I thought I was good, but really I wasn't really that good. And there's so many things to improve. And I thought, okay, let me just focus on one metric. And we have this metric called patience. Patience measures how, if we're having a conversation, once he's done speaking, how long do I wait to respond? So really what it's measuring is, am I good at active listening or am I interrupting him? And I was like, let me just focus on improving this. It was like 0.6 at the time in measuring seconds. I got it up to like 0.9 1 second, which actually feels a little unnatural, but like it gets the numbers up, which I cared about. But like within a year, I got promoted because that was the biggest thing that improved literally everything. My talk time went down. My questions went up. Customers talk a lot more. And when you analyze the data for good conversations, especially throughout a very successful deal, they all kind of look the same. They have low talk time. They have a lot of questions by the rep. They have good patience. So like if you think about, that's why I asked the question about the Oura ring. Sleep wasn't measured before. Sales was not measured before. It can be measured now. And if you focus on the things that you know works and get better at those, you will, before you even know it, you become a better seller. I'm going to try to make this as fun as possible. So if you have questions, ask. I like it interactive. So let's do it. So what am I going to present is 5 data-backed techniques and how to get better at sales, at managing and leading sales teams. But I want to kick it off with this clip. Does anybody know where this is from? Moneyball. Perfect. Who's seen Moneyball? Who's seen Moneyball more than once? Twice? 3 times? I've seen it a lot. Okay, cool. I'm gonna play this clip and then we'll get into it here. All right. So the reason I like to show that clip is if you've seen the movie, he's in a room with a lot of old school scouts. And they were thinking about replacing the one player they lost with very expensive players because they thought he needed to look like a star. He's got to have a good arm. He's got to have all these things that really have nothing to do with winning. And what this guy brought, Billy Bean brought as a manager of the team, was this revolution of using math and statistics to actually build a very cheap but very successful team. And they all went on to win a ton of games. They didn't win the whole thing eventually, but they were so successful that they swept baseball in baseball, everybody has somebody like a fat Jonah Hill in this. Everybody has one of them in the room. So this is kind of what I'm passionate about in sales. I think there are things in sales, like this kind of mystical conversations and sales process between people that I think can benefit from this kind of revolution. And my team, I run this team at Gong, which is all about, actually, let me back up for a second. Everybody know about Gong? It's okay if you don't. Okay, cool. So Gong is basically, don't kill me for this pitch. It's going to be better. Thomas is from Gong as well. He's an AE, so you have a better pitch than me. But the way I like to explain it is basically we record conversations and we give you analytics. If you're an AE, how you can do better. If you're a manager, you can kind of improve your team. That's the most basic level what Gong does. There's more. But we have all these data points across conversations that we can look at across sales cycles. So calls, emails, virtual meetings. We can understand like what was shared in terms of case studies, contract, etc., demos, slide shares. And for this, what I'm about to show you, we did this across 600,000 calls and emails, as across 200 of our own sales reps at Gong, and over basically 3 years of data. It's a lot of data. That's the point of this slide. Cool. Let me move on. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is the quantity versus quality debate that I think a lot of us hear about. So I think if you're an SDR, which I know Lucien was what's that? Oh yeah, you were as well. Yeah. I forgot. It's so long ago at this point. I think we've all had that manager who's like, hey, how many calls did you make today? Right? Is anybody familiar with, even as a founder, you probably have some targets, right? So I think it was like maybe 3 months ago, there's this huge debate on LinkedIn, like, is it quantity of activity or is it quality? Quality meaning like, the type is how personalized your email. So we decided to tackle and try to understand like what actually is the true answer. So it's quantity for sure, and then quality, which is kind of changed the game because everybody was like, it's either this or that. It's like, Barcelona or Madrid, whatever. What we found is basically you have to build a foundation of quantity, which is really interesting, right? So we analyzed all these data, and we found that if you're able to hit 85 hours of time with customers across calls and emails, you had a very good chance of hitting 98% attainment, so nearly 100. So that's the base. If you build on top of it quality, which is if you can actually keep your talk time between 40 and 50% on conversations and ask more than 15 questions per 30 minutes, you have a chance of hitting 120%. And this is across like 3/4 of data. Yeah, of course. Yeah. The interesting thing about this is really hard to do. I think most people, when they go through conversations, like the first call, you ask a lot of questions, right? Second call, less questions. Third call, less questions. You get more data and you're like, all right, let's just close the deal, right? There's a lot of this, like, let's push it through. To maintain this, you have to always be asking questions. Like if you detect anything that might be off, when we talk to a lot of sales leaders, they're like, oh, this to me means that my rep is very good at constantly asking questions, even when they don't think they need to. If they hear something's wrong, they'll ask a question about it and they'll figure out what's going on there before they move on. So that's only maintain this question rate and this talk time. So the first takeaway is as a rep, build a foundation with quantity and then overachieve with quality. And the reason this works is because if you flip it, if you do quality first and then quantity, you have no chance. So this is the right formula. And the second one, and you'll hear this theme over and over again, is like maintain this posture of always doing discovery. The discovery does not end in the beginning. It continues throughout a sales cycle. And what we found over and over again is that the reps who are very good at just constantly being very curious, even when they think things are going well, asking, hey, what will prevent us from signing? What will prevent us from XYZ? Those reps do really well and are able to maintain that quality that we saw. Cool? I'll keep it going. All right, second one. Can I make a suggestion? This is a really interesting talk track. Does anybody use this, but in Spanish? How does that sound in Spanish? So long. Okay. Okay. That's good. I'm gonna cue you to say that again in a second. All right. So we did this other study of trying to understand like what it took to book meetings. It's really hard. Cold calls are so hard. So we analyzed the data for the successful cold calls against the unsuccessful cold calls. And here are two big categories that we found that we didn't implement it at Gong, and our numbers went through the roof. So the first thing is we found this talk track. So interesting. Can I make a suggestion? One more time. Thank you. When we talk to reps and leaders about this, they were saying reps who do this, usually they take the lead in conversations. A bad cold call sounds like, once you get to a point, it sounds like, hey, when do you want to meet next? It's you're on your back foot. When you get to a point in the call where you say, hey, can I make a suggestion? Let's meet next Thursday, and why don't you bring your CFO and that's the kind of conversation that this means you're having. The other thing that we found that they used a lot more is the words I've noticed. And what's interesting about I've noticed is you can't say that without doing some research about them, right? And this showed up a lot more. What didn't show up was, hey, you just got a lot of funding. Do you want to talk about buying a tool? Like, that was really funny to see funding show up in all the bad conversations. So I've noticed is really powerful. If you even force yourself just to use it, if you come to the call with a I've noticed statement, you're going to get instant credibility a lot more. This last one, this is tied to this kind of chains together. Top priority for you. So once you say I've noticed XYZ, hey, is this a top priority for you, or is another thing a top priority for you? So this kind of like priorities type research is really important for these conversations. Now, what didn't work, and this is actually really interesting for us. So back in 2022, we launched some new like messaging because we became this platform, and we use a lot of like really buzzy conceptual words that don't really mean anything, to be honest. It was like, oh, we're in the platform for like I forgot what it was. It's just bad. And we found out that this was doing really poorly. One, because it took too long to deliver. And the ones that worked were like really tactical things. Like, do you want to close more deals? Do you want to actually have more visibility of your calls? So that's what showed up as other one. And this other one is really interesting. I think a lot of SDRs are traditionally not trained to mention pricing on the first call. And we didn't know how bad it was until we looked at the data. And we found out because our SDRs would just freeze up when they got asked about pricing, and they would fumble it. So it was really bad. So we actually changed the talk track where they can actually mention some pricing to get to the next conversation. So this is all done through data. And my team, I'm not in sales. I just look at the data. I go to the team, and this is what shows up. So the takeaway, take the lead, right? If you think about the can I make a suggestion type posture, it means that you are always showing the customer what to do next. You get information, then you recommend. You get information, then you recommend. You don't want to be like, hey, what do you do next? It's their first time buying whatever you're selling. It's not your first time selling it. So you always remember that. It's kind of guide the customer. The second one, if you have really buzzy value prop that you're talking where it takes like maybe longer than 30 seconds to deliver, it's not going to work. Imagine you get a cold call and this guy's talking about how great their product is and it takes 30 seconds. It's just not going to work. So, two really great tips for booking more meetings. All right, keep it going here. Let me ask a question here. So how many of you are like reps and account executives? Okay, how many of you manage a team? Awesome. Okay, this is gonna be good then. Yeah, half and half. Okay, so has anybody heard of skill versus will, this concept? You have? Okay, you work for Salesforce. I'll just, all right, so the concept of skill versus will is this. We, for a long time, just was trying to understand the relationship between like how much time you spend with customers and how much you actually kind of end up in terms of how you perform for the quarter. So we just plotted it. This is one sales team. Along the y-axis is their attainment, like where they landed in terms of how they did for the quarter. And across the bottom is how much time they spent with customers across calls and emails. We drew some lines. We just drew out the median and on both. And you start to get a picture of where to focus your time, right? Let me talk to the managers first. So what we found is that there are different ways to treat people in these cohorts. And the best way to coach is not to spend all your time evenly across everybody, is actually focus your time in certain cohorts. And for reps, this is actually good because you don't want to be in a bad cohort. And I'll tell you why in a second here. So the first cohort that we found that we thought was really magical was this one, where compared to everybody else, they were not putting as much effort, but they're getting a lot of results. You might be one of them, actually. When we talk to sales leaders, they're like, we don't try to replicate them because there's probably something you do that's very unique to you that will not work for anybody else. So if you're a manager, you let these people, you leave them alone. Don't tell a new hire to go copy them because there's really nothing to learn from them. If they learn from them, they might fail. The second cohort is this cohort here, the go-getters, which I assume it's a lot of you here because you're also here. But it's high effort and it's also high performance. For this cohort, managers also say, wait, can someone take a guess? Do you work on them? Do you leave them alone? Take a guess. Yeah, you leave them alone. And for a lot of managers, for this, it becomes like, how do I get them to stay at Gong? Thomas is one of them. One of these go-getters right here. I know your data. It's good. The worst cohort to be in, and you don't want to stay in here for too long, but there is hope for you, is this cohort where you're low effort and also low performance. And with any leader of any team, their idea, if they're pretty ruthless, they're like, we got to get rid of them immediately. If they're less ruthless, you have 2 quarters to improve, otherwise you're out. Because you're not even trying to improve, right? Like you're not putting effort and you're not getting results. Now that leaves this cohort right here, the high potential performers. If you're a manager, this is where you spend all of your time coaching because in terms of ROI for your time, these folks are putting in the work. They probably need just 1 or 2 things on coaching and they will pop into this quadrant. So this has changed a lot of kind of sales coaching in the US. A lot of kind of US companies are asking for this to understand where they spend time, where to manage out, and who to leave alone. And there's kind of different things to leave these folks alone. There's also some other trends. So I mentioned like, don't stay in this cohort. What we found is like when we pay attention to a couple of these reps, over time, there's no way to get to this quadrant from here without first being here. You have to get your effort. So we talked about quantity, right? Get your quantity up, improve your quality, and you pop in here. Almost never do you go from here to here, which is really interesting to see over the course of like 3 years. Cool. All right, the last one, this is really powerful if you're a manager or if you're a founder, and honestly, if you're a rep as well. Managers have a crazy influence on teams. We see this in the data too. This is a manager B, this is manager A. You can see it so clearly. We were looking at the data, we're like, I think there are some circles we can draw around whose team these reps are on. And we actually found that if you take one of these reps from manager B and you put under manager A, they start looking like the team in manager A. So if you're a rep, you want to change your destiny, maybe find a manager that you really, can like follow and respect their style. If you're a leader and you're trying to improve some teams, you can start seeing these trends and maybe you kind of change your team and kind of reallocate reps based on what they need. Cool. We're almost at the end. All right. So takeaway, observe for momentum. But the momentum I was talking about is if you're a manager or leader, your senior reps go from like bottom left to bottom right. Ooh, invest in those people. They're putting in work. They just need a little bit of coaching and they're going to pop right to the top. This is a really important one. This is hard for people to do because people generally want to spend time with their worst people and their best people. That's just a common human nature thing. Spend it unevenly. Find the ones who are at bottom, kind of like that quadrant where they're spending a lot of effort. They're not quite getting there, but spend all your time with them. That's the most high value coaching you can do. All right. Okay. So let's talk about, there's coaching unevenly in terms of like who you coach, but there's also coaching unevenly in like when you coach on calls. So this is really interesting. Across the middle there, we have a full deal cycle, right? And it goes from discovery, generally the first call, to like the last call, right? And what we found when we looked at Gong data was really fascinating. The top managers, they coach on calls via Gong early in the deal, which means they're listening to calls, they're commenting on calls. They are not joining the calls. As the deal progresses later in the deal, they actually join the conversation, they actually sell with the reps. Anybody know what the reason is? Yeah, that's part of it. So this is actually a good line for probability, right? When a deal is here, it's less likely to close. When it's here, it's more likely to close. You kind of like, you want to invest all your time because this takes a lot of effort. You want to invest effort when things are more likely. the managers here, they do a really good job of actually spreading their influence across a bunch of different deals by saying, I'm not going to join calls, but I will coach on all the discovery calls. So I'm influencing actually more calls at the same time. As there's less deals go through the to this stage, they actually join it to actually bulletproof the win rate for these deals. And low performing managers that we saw actually flip it. They don't have a lot of trust. They want to influence calls really early. So they join the reps on a discovery call, but you end up hurting them because they don't know how to sell alone on discovery call now. And they actually, because they're so bogged down with those early stage calls, they can't join the calls later to actually help those deals close. So it's a huge learning that also changed the way we kind of manage deals at Gong. Everybody follows this format. If you see early stage calls, it's peppered with comments and listens and all these things. And then you see a lot of managers join their reps. I'm like, okay, who do I talk to actually get this deal closed? And it follows a line of probability, right? Low probability, high probability. All right, I'm going fast. I know it's getting... So takeaway, coach wide early. So coach really wide on a set of deals early, and then join deep later in the deal. Okay, the last one here. I like talking about this just because it's a hard lesson learned at Gong. Quick story. Before 2021, at Gong, we only sold single year contracts, 1 year deals. Much easier to sell, right? After COVID, that was a disaster because if you're up for renewal at a time when the economy is bad, you get chopped. And then when we looked at other companies, they had multi-year deals so they could ride out the pandemic, ride out all the stuff that's, that bad came out of the pandemic, where you're in better times and then the renewal becomes easier. So as a company, we were like, how do we get better at selling multi-year deals? That was like the big thing. If you think about multi-year deals, they're like shock absorbers for your business. It's like taking vitamins for your business. So I was this way. I thought about multi-year deals in a way that was like, man, some companies just say no. They have policies against multi-year deals. Who else thinks that? Okay, yeah. I've been burned by it before. Another thing is like, well, if I can't sell it, it's not in my control. Like if they're growing as a company, they'll get a multi-year deal. If they're not growing, they're definitely not going to sign multi-year deals. So that was the two big assumptions that everybody pretty much at Gong had. Like, how do we actually get better at multi-selling when it's not in our control? Well, we did the analysis. We actually analyzed a bunch of multi-year deals. We looked at deals in which we pitched multi-year and won the multi-year against the deals we pitched multi-year, but only landed us 1 year deal. And this is what we found. There are no hard no's. There are no hard policies, which is crazy. I was like, man, I probably should have worked harder at selling multi-year deals back when I was selling. So when that's true, it just requires a mentality shift. We knew that, and then we started incentivizing selling multi-year deals. Right? We just got to get better at this. So once you let them know there's no hard no's, they're like, okay, just go, work harder at it. The second one that was really true, I think most people present multi-year as part of a discount, right? Like if you want a discount, then you get a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, you buy more of what we sell, etc. Right? What we found is when you present it that way, it never works. Never works. What it needs to be done is to be positioned as a solve for their problems. And what that requires is actually goes back to the discovery thing. You got to do enough discovery to understand the initiatives that they have that take more than 1 year to solve. And you say, oh, perfect. Gong will actually help you achieve that over the course of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And those happen, it actually works a lot better. So those are two big learnings that we had. So we actually changed that we sell multi-year based on these findings from the data. So that's the biggest takeaway. Uncover the multi-year initiatives when you're doing discovery. Everything kind of ties together, right? If you're taking the lead, if you're doing enough discovery, you're understanding what is important to them, you'll naturally find this. And one little tip I'll give you, if your company has been around long enough, well, we also found the guys who are really good at selling these, you're really good at finding second-time buyers. So basically someone that used the product at another company, or they bought the same tool before, and they become your champions that actually sell these multi-year deals. Cool. I'm going to give you a bonus. One more bonus. I know it's so hot in here. We're going to get through this. All right. So what we've learned is really important. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about, which is we looked at calls that went from discovery to the next stage. So basically successful discovery conversations. We have all these data points and most of it actually looked the same. There was no big difference except for one thing. Presentation. So we saw for successful discovery, they showed a slide. Gong can detect if it shows slides. They showed a slide 3 times longer, or almost 4 times longer, than calls that did not move past. And we're like, wait, what is this signal? Because I think most people, you've probably been taught, don't share slides too early because people get bored, right? Well, we talked to a bunch of reps, we talked to a bunch of managers, and what we found is that they all use this one slide. What we've learned. And the magical thing about this slide is they show up with this slide with some things populated, but then they do discovery with the prospect live. And why that's great is because if I'm talking to you, you see me typing something that's wrong, you will correct me. And it's very engaging discovery. And then once they have that slide populated, they take the slide and they take it to every single call afterwards, because you establish instant credibility with the next person you talk to, because they know you know so much about their business. So it's a really easy hack. Show up to a call with what we've learned at the top, populate with some things you know about it to show that you've done the effort, right? That builds some credibility for you immediately. And then you can bring this with you to the rest of the sales cycle and have much better conversations with everybody else afterwards. Cool. All right, 3 things. I know it's 5. I want to bring it down to 3. Number 1, quantity, then quality. That's the most important thing. Don't over-rotate on, oh, I need to improve my discovery. No. Get the numbers up, and then you can improve everything else. You get the numbers up, you naturally improve on everything else. Number 2, take the lead via a constant discovery posture. If you can always be asking questions, they're going to know that you've done this before. Ask the right questions, you get their, you're demonstrating that like you're curious and that you're trying to learn about the business, and that's going to take you really far. And the last one, I think this is the most important. If you're a manager, this is like the biggest thing, is good coaching equals uneven coaching. If you spend time with your best people and your worst people, you're doing it wrong. Find the people who are really trying. So they're high effort, maybe don't have the performance yet, but that's where you should spend all your time coaching. I think that's it. Now we just go for questions. Thank you all.
Nice, guys. Well, we'll release you. Thank you so much to the Gong guys. Thank you, Sunny. Follow him on LinkedIn. He drops this stuff every day. It's amazing. And yeah, go have some beer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, preguntas.
So you want questions?
Questions. Sorry, questions.
Are there any questions?
Yep, go for it.
Do you have a suggestion or you have a question?
Yeah, I think some businesses have been around where like it's part of their compensation plan. For us, it was pretty new. Like we had a huge spiff. Do you guys the same word here? Yeah. So we do spiffs. There's heavily compensated where like if you sold a multi-year deal, it was like 1.5 times commission, something like that. So you do have to incentivize it, because I know this. Sometimes 1-year deal, you can close it, you make your number. Sometimes multi-year deals take a little bit longer. So you have to incentivize as a business. We learned it the hard way, right? We had to kind of learn the hard lesson of, man, why are all these customers not renewing when they love the product? It's because they couldn't afford it. But when you're able to have 2-3 years, you actually have more time to prove out the value of your solution. So it's a more long-term thinking on when it comes to like your business and your product. Good question. Any other question? Yep, go for it. I knew that question was coming. I also might get out of here without people asking that. It's a good question. I'll be very honest. Like this data is on mostly, against we're selling against American companies, right? I totally get that. But I will say this, in absence of data here, this is just good process. And if you follow the process, and there's other thing I forgot to mention about like having athletes and like, ex-liberal arts science majors, you have to experiment. You really have to experiment. The best reps are, they see something out there, they try it. If it works, they use it. So try this. I think the themes I gave are generally true for any market because you're taking the lead, right? Like if you're buying something, you don't want to be like, hey, so what do we do next? You want something to be like, hey, right this way, then you go here, then you go there, and then you'll get this beautiful thing at the end, right? So I think that general idea is good, but maybe take the themes and apply it and figure out the way, like how it best resonates with the market and for the people you talk to. But again, if I'm in a vacuum where there's no data, I'm going to go to something and try it because maybe it's proven elsewhere and see what actually works. It's a good question. Yes. No, I think we're like anybody else. I think Thomas will love it if they're all evangelists. Like that's just not how it works. It's been phases, right? Like when we started, we're a new concept on the market back in 2018. Recording calls is crazy for half the people we're talking to. So, I mean, marketing plays a part in changing the narrative of what it means to be a good company. Now people are like, well, if you don't have a recording solution or something like Gong, then like, I don't want to work there. But no, it's definitely not evangelists. I think it's a lot like anybody else. You have to go prospecting and people you think will be good for you, and you make your way to the decision makers. And if you follow this process, that's what it ultimately leads you to do. You do enough discovery, you build the credibility, you can eventually get to the decision makers that'll help you close your deal. That's right. Yeah, the leveling, right? So that totally works. That still works. Yeah, you don't need data to tell you that. Yeah, the matching levels is something that's done pretty frequently. I'd say it depends on different segments, right? I think down market, smaller companies, doing that doesn't help that much. But doing that early doesn't help that much. When you get up market, if you can find a way to actually land with a senior title by bringing one of your senior title, it's an easier sales cycle instead of having to work your way all the way up. So if that works for you, I think that's the right way to do it. 100%. Yeah. Let's take one or two more and then we can, yes. Yeah. This is a question for everybody else. His question was like, when did I fall in love with sales? Is that your question? Yeah. For me, I like the data. Like I said, when I saw what sales looked like at my last company, I was like, I do not want to do this. It takes too long. They're never home. They're always on the road spending time with customers. And I think, things change. Like a lot of sales is remote now. You can actually be at your own house and try to solve problems for other people. So when I got really in touch with the data and I saw that top performers had certain characteristics, and I was like, well, I can do that. And that became really fun. And I don't sell in the traditional way now. I have a side business that I get to practice on. But I mean, if you're a founder, you're always selling. Like these concepts are not that different than like everyday life. So I really like it because it's about persuasion and just making somebody feel like you have the answer, right? Which a lot of times you do when you like talking to somebody where you're trying to sell to. So for me, it really is the data. Like once I saw some trends, I was like, oh my God, if I just did this, I could make this much money. I haven't done it yet, but because I'm still really in love with the data. But that's something I think, like I've never thought about doing sales more than I did after joining Gong. It's true. But before I joined Gong, I told Iban, I was like, I don't know if I want to sell, but I want to become a sales whisperer. That was a real quote. And he was like, I think you could do it. And I wasn't doing that at first, but like just throughout the journey, I was looking at my metrics and I was like, whoa, these got better and I got promoted. These got better and I got another thing, right? And I was seen as more better and better, even though like nobody's telling me to improve certain metrics. Also true of sales.
So in the last 2 years, we saw how the quota attainment worldwide metrics has kind of decreased in B2B SaaS. I think like just following the end of the golden age of SaaS, probably that is what everyone talks about. Based on your data, what has changed in the last 2 years, or maybe what do the best or the top performers do compared to 2 years ago that now plays with the new rules of B2B SaaS?
I love this question. I wonder what you guys think too. So I think the biggest trend that's shifted is that there's so much more data out there now on like reviews on your product. People are more savvy about the internet, that I think customers are increasingly more self-informed, and they're looking for information on your product so they don't have to talk to you. So there's a new trend where I think like if you can actually engage with a buyer outside of conversations, you win. And I know this to be true. I haven't finished the analysis on this yet, but we have another metric in Gong called responsiveness. It's how quickly do you respond to emails that come to you that need responding to. And all the sales leaders I talked to, they said, my top performers are the most responsive. What this tells me is that there's so many things happening between meetings. If you ever bought a tool, you're like, okay, the call was cool, but I only like really got 2 things out of it. And then you maybe do some research and maybe you want to send something to bring other people on board to actually understand what's going on. So the quicker you are to responding to what customers need between meetings, those are what's defining top performers now. It's not as much of like, oh, he's great on conversations. It's how good are you actually delivering what the customer needs in between the meetings, because that's when everything's happening. I'm buying software right now. As bad as it is to say, I hate being on sales calls. I really want everything. Like if I have a question that comes up in a meeting with my boss that might determine if I buy the tool or not, I need it in 30 minutes before I talk to this person. So the responsiveness thing is real. Like that's the thing we started measuring, and that has like opened up a whole new realm of, I think, of buying behavior where it's very self-guided. And you see a lot of tools coming out of like this collaboration space between the AE and the customer, where like you have all the docs in there. You don't have to like talk to each other, actually interact and get information. I think that's in response to what we're seeing in the market right now. I don't know how that applies to quota attainment, to be honest, but it's definitely a trend I'm seeing. Even I'm feeling like, man, I can get all this information online. I don't know what we're on calls for. Yeah. Good question. Oh, yep. Uh, 15 questions every 30 minutes. Per 30 minutes. It's a lot, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. No, I know. It is. I will say that the reps that get really comfortable with that do well, right? And it's not. There's a difference between like short, closing the questions, like to get one word answers, and like, how are you guys solving that today? If you don't solve this, what's going to happen in 2 weeks? Questions like that are more open-ended to get them to think about, man, maybe our situation right now is not that good. We need to change. That tends to work. And I will say, so that 15 is basically for the entire sales cycle. I think that 15 could be true on average. Like you could actually do more than 15 earlier in the sales stage because you're trying to understand a lot about the customer. But that's 15 blended across maybe 8 or 9 calls, which means even as you get towards the end, you're still asking questions to make sure that they're in a good position to buy. No, on average per call. So most people front load it. Most people do like maybe 20, 25 questions. I mean, not that many, but like a lot of questions early in the sales stage. And then what we tend to see is that they stop asking the same amount of questions towards the end because they think they got to figure it out. I don't know. It's a good question. We don't have data on that. But yeah, you have to be aware of like discovery fatigue, right? And this is where the art comes in. Like the data says do this many, but you got to figure out like how do you ask and how do you maintain this rate in a way that's not annoying to your buyer. That's where the art comes in for you. And this is what the human side that we're talking about right here. It's a good question. We have some data on Gong Labs. I don't have that handy, unfortunately. I really think it varies for every single. But I mean, the common sales thing I've heard, when I did this tour in the US, what the people love to say is like a full pipeline solves all problems, and that's true. Like if you have good coverage against your number, you have less to worry about. And the best reps, even the most senior reps, they're always prospecting. Always prospecting. One of the things that we saw in that kind of the go-getter cohort is that the folks that tend to reach that cohort tend to stay there. We're like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense, because they should have figured out how to sell, and maybe just enough to make the number, and just like maybe don't put in more effort. When we did some interviews, all these reps, they prospect for the next quarter in the current quarter that they're in. That's how they stay in that top range. So this prospecting thing is like, I don't sell, so I can't speak to how painful it is. It must be really hard, but that is one of the things that the trends that we see. If you're always prospecting, you don't really have to worry about hitting quota. Yeah. Okay, so I like that. So one of the things, typically when that happens, it means you went through the deal even when you knew they were a bad fit. So one of the things we know of good sellers is that they disqualify ruthlessly. If they do not meet what you think looks like they're going to buy, do not spend more time with them. And the best reps are really good, just like, all right, they're not going to buy. Okay, I might keep them warm, put them in a sequence, but I'm not going to spend any more time with them. So usually what you're talking about there means they're a little desperate. They want to try to get a deal closed, and they kind of push past what's necessary. I don't have data around that. I just know that for a fact. Like beyond the prospecting, they also know like when to give up on deals really quickly. The earlier, the better. And that's actually what a lot of sales managers spend time with reps on early, because when you're in sales, you're generally optimistic. You want to like, okay, I can probably try to close this deal. The seasoned reps are like, oh, that's never going to close, and they move on quickly, and they are good sales reps because of that. So the more you can kind of figure out how to do that for yourself, the better. Cool.
Cool. Take one more last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm sweating too. Go for it. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Whoa. Yeah. It's a good question. Who's there's a startup. Oh, Vendor. Has anybody heard of Vendor? So they're like an agency that helps you buy tools. It's really sneaky what they do. They basically like figure out what every company's paying for certain tools, and they use that information against that company. It's pretty sweet. I like it. Respect to them. So with that data, I think they could do AI buying. I don't know how much that's happening just yet. I think ultimately we still want some oversight on what we're buying, because there's like packages and customizations and things. And I think another thing is like how you sell is really important to like the reflection of the company you're getting in business with. AI buying, if the AI outreach is that bad, I don't think it's that at that point we can actually figure out, be cool about what you're buying via AI. That's a trend to watch out for. I haven't really thought about that, but yeah, what Vendor's doing is like really sneaky and really good. So cool. Great questions. Thank you all. Thank you all so much.